Hey guys! Tonight we are heading somewhere warm, sandy, and just a little bit damp with river mist. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning begins with historians still argue whether specific sections were designated for different chores like upstream for drinking, downstream for laundry, or whether it was more of a free-for-all. Either way, you quickly learn that morning is prime laundry time. Flat stones are cleared of sand, buckets set down, and woven baskets placed carefully to avoid splinters catching the delicate fabric. In tomb paintings, you see people dressed in crisp, glowing garments. Even though in real life, sand and sweat were constant enemies, laundry, a goose flaps past, annoyed at your intrusion. Life feels repetitive, yet calming. Step, wash, rinse, lay out to dry. It's just the start of the day, and already you sense how much effort goes into something you casually toss into a machine. Ancient Egyptian families didn't have spin cycles, they had patience. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke you promised yourself you wouldn't think about again? And move on quickly? Because this particular jar is strictly for laundry. This one contains mashed soapwort the plant colleagues call the washer's friend. You watch as a handful of chopped stems and leaves is swirled in a separate bowl. The liquid froths delicately at the edges. As if a cappuccino, historians still argue whether these additions had consistent, measurable effects, or were the charming superstition of resourceful people improvising with what was at hand. When they flick it off, the mark lightens, and you feel the nerdy glee of a successful spot test. You also file away a life lesson. Always trust people who carry time. You catch an earthy, nutty scent, like a pantry trying to be a spa. A quirky tidbit wafts in with the aroma. Certain launderers rub a touch of aromatic resin, maybe. The women nod approvingly, like judges at a sleepiest Olympics. The ash is sprinkled sparingly into a basin. You drift towards the plant piles and learn to recognize the laundry palette, soapwort's tender sprouts. Desert date fragments. Baskets of natron. The care is justified. One tug too harsh and the threads fray like an overused bookmark. Medicine, chemistry, humor. The laundry yard is a cross-disciplinary department with excellent riverside views. Some families keep written marks, little ink dots on the rims of their jars, indicating which mixture is which. Others rely on color and scent, the scent being faintly sweet, faintly herbaceous. When a breeze lifts, powder skates through light and settles on your arm. You brush it away. Chalky fingerprints. You arrive late enough to see the order already established. A woven basket on the left stone means taken, while an abandoned jug on the right stone. The middle generation kneels at the stones, forearms damp, voices exchanging the news of the fields and the temple. The teenagers float between jobs, equal parts help and distraction, while small children orbit as decoys for both chaos and joy. Without them, fields wouldn't drink, and laundry stones would sit high and dry. Feeling dramatic for no reason. Here, claim markers matter. One family lays a loop of... You catch yourself tapping a gentle rhythm on the stone, the same tempo used to whisk soapwort into foam. Everything in this landscape insists on rhythm. The flood, the planting. Historians still argue whether towns formally designated such spaces, posting rules enforced by officials, or whether the patterns emerged informally. And you make a mental note not to repeat outfits to the canal twice in 1 week. The stones remember. What you don't see is as telling as what you do. You crouch there for a moment, hearing the tiny pop of bubbles as submerged fabric settles. A dragonfly skims the surface, unimpressed by your presence. The stillness whispers that half of cleaning is waiting. A truth modern spin cycles disguise with words. You trace with your eyes the ways families personalize their spaces. One wedges a pebble just so to keep a jar from wobbling. Another lines up reed brushes by size. One corner near the bend hosts a communal rinse trough, a shallow clay-lined channel fed by a cleverly placed notch in the canal bank. Water trickles steadily. It all fits, like threads in linen, snug but breathable. A boy trotting by pauses to tell you that the smooth stone 2 spots down is the rhythm changes as you glance along the stones. The soaking and soaking again are only preludes. The real show begins when the women roll up their sleeves. Imagine trying to explain to them that you trust a box of blue pods to do this for you. They'd likely hand you a stick and suggest you start pounding. The moves vary. Some women kneel and another sighs about a lazy husband who pretends to fetch water, but comes back empty because he accidentally chatted with a fisherman for half an hour. The laughter rolls, and you notice the beating of cloth keeps pace with the rise and fall of their words. Laundry isn't just cleaning, it's social theater. It's also therapy. Each strike against the stone is part exorcism, part cardio. A quirky tidbit drifts your way. Sometimes small pebbles are tucked inside cloth bundles before stomping. The stones add friction and help scrape out embedded dirt, like a prehistoric washing machine agitator. You try to imagine your own laundry tumbling with gravel and can't decide if that's brilliant or reckless. Probably both. And yes, you're right to wonder. Historians still argue whether this practice was universal or regional, because evidence is fragmentary. Archaeological reports describe wear on fabrics and stones. But whether pebbles, what is certain is that feet pounding rhythmically on cloth left distinct wear patterns. And the sound became part of the soundtrack of village life. Nearby, a young woman demonstrates twisting. She folds a tunic diagonally, grips each end, and wrings it so tightly that water jets out like a squirt gun aimed at destiny. The jet arcs into the canal, startling a duck who quacks indignantly. That's joke number 2. Apparently ducks have been giving side-eye since the Old Kingdom. The woman's forearms flex with effort. She pauses to shake them out, then resumes. You think of modern gym classes labeled spin, except here the spinning is literal and leaves you with dry sleeves instead of toned calves. A man carrying a basket of reeds pauses to watch. He offers a comment about technique, suggesting that stomping with the left foot first ensures even wear. The women roll their eyes clearly. This is the mansplaining of laundry and return to their rhythm. Still, you file it away as possible wisdom. Ancient Egypt was a culture obsessed with order and balance. It would fit if laundry routines also followed symmetry. Whether it made a difference or not, well, historians still argue about that, too. The canal stones turn slick with suds and mist. You lean back to avoid splatters, but a stray droplet lands on your cheek anyway. It's cool, faintly salty. And you realize you're tasting a mixture of natron and Nile water. Not exactly gourmet. Across from you, 2 teenagers pound linen in playful competition, each trying to make the louder thud. Their mother warns them not to tear the fabric, but their grins betray no remorse. You chuckle softly some things, like sibling rivalry. Refuse to age. Here's joke number 3. A boy runs past with a cloth tied around his waist, stomps theatrically on the stone, then declares he's helping. His mother points out that it's his only clean garment he's stomping. The boy looks down, thighs, and mutters the ancient equivalent of oops. You feel a pang of sympathy. You've been there, though perhaps not in a tunic. Beyond the noise and play, you start to hear the quieter consequences of the work. The fibers relax, the water runs clearer, and the garments lose their dusty stiffness. Linen loves this treatment. The pounding helps break in its stubborn texture, making it softer with each wash. A mainstream fact slides in gently. Egyptian linen was so fine that priests and nobles often wore sheer garments, layered for modesty. But sheer or not, every layer needed washing, and every layer endured the same pounding against stone. Imagine the priest's fine robe undergoing the same treatment as a farmer's shirt. It all ends with suds on the stones. Some women beat in deliberate sequences 5 thuds. A pause, 5 thuds again, as if counting prayers. It becomes hypnotic. You let the cadence pull you, the repetition settling like a lullaby. Your eyelids droop despite the bustle around you. The thud, thud, pause. Thud, thud could easily replace a metronome. You drift, almost swaying with a rhythm, until a loud stomp splashes water on your ankle. The cold shock wakes you, and you grin sheepishly at the woman who caused it. She grins back. a silent apology wrapped in humor. A boy trots by carrying a piece of papyrus scrap covered in scribbles. He lays it on a stone and pounds it with a cloth, giggling. You recognize the impulse children mimic whatever they see, even if the object makes no sense. The papyrus disintegrates, ink bleeding into the water. Somewhere a scribe groans, without knowing why. You promise silently to avenge the lost homework later. And all the while, the air fills with steady rhythm, conversation, and that faint mineral tang. You watch fabric soften and whiten, stains fade, laughter ripple. Laundry is labor. Yes, but also exercise. Every strike against stone leaves not just cleaner fabric, but echoes that ripple through community memory. By the time the cloth is ready for rinsing, your shoulders ache sympathetically just from watching. Yet you also feel strangely calm, as if the monotony has massaged the edges off your own restless mind. Buckets swing from rope handles, sloshing rhythmically as children trot back and forth between the flat stones and the Nile. You join the stream of helpers, following the faint trail of wet footprints that shine like fish scales on the sand. Each step closer to the water cools your feet, and the hum of washing fades into the hush of the river. You dip a clay jug into the current, feeling the pull as the Nile tugs greedily at its mouth. The jug fills with a satisfying glug, and for a moment you're sure the water itself sighs in relief, as if pleased to be part of laundry day. When you return to the stones, you watch the real magic rinsing. The beaten, twisted linen lies limp, like exhausted dancers after rehearsal. Women lift each piece, dunk it into wide baskets woven from reeds, and then lower the baskets into the river. The fibers loosen, the suds drift away, and the cloth sways under the surface as fish dart between hems. A mainstream fact, the Nile teemed with species such as Nile perch and tilapia, many of which ended up on dinner tables. But for now, the fish are accidental laundry companions, weaving among tunics as if auditioning for a watery fashion show. One young boy gets distracted, tipping his basket too far until a small shirt escapes and floats downstream. He splashes after it, but a quick-handed ant uses her reed pole to snag the garment and flick it back with a flourish. Everyone claps politely, like an audience at a very niche Olympic sport. That's joke number one you didn't know synchronized shirt rescue was a discipline. But apparently, it has long-standing traditions. The rinsing takes time. Each cloth must be submerged, swirled, lifted, and wrung again. Some women scoop water with clay bowls and pour it slowly over the fabric, watching as gray streaks of grime run down the stone into the canal. The process looks meditative, repetitive enough that your mind slips into a drowsy rhythm. You find yourself counting dip, swirl, pour, ring, like counting sheep. But instead of leaping fences, they dive headfirst into buckets. A quirky tidbit woven reed baskets often double as strainers, letting water pass through while trapping garments inside. This way, smaller items like children's tunics don't float away like runaway boats. Some families even knot a cord across the basket's mouth as insurance. You imagine losing your only clean kilt to the Nile and having to explain it at home. Sorry, the river stole it. That excuse, you suspect, doesn't win sympathy. Along the far bank, a woman slaps the fabric directly into the shallows, rinsing in place. Each strike sends droplets flashing upward, startling a dragonfly that zips away like a neon arrow. Historians still argue whether Egyptians preferred rinsing in moving water or in contained basins. Both methods left traces in the archaeological record. Basins offered control, rivers offered abundance. Today, the river wins, because nothing rivals the sheer convenience of a current doing half your work. You notice how the Nile smells at this hour, damp reeds. Faint fish. The mineral tang of silt. It isn't unpleasant, just earthy and real, like the smell of rain-soaked cloth. You lean closer, watching sunlight ripple across submerged garments, turning folds of linen into shimmering scales. The sight is oddly soothing, as though the river itself is rocking the fabric to sleep. You wonder if anyone ever nodded off mid-rinse. Probably. Laundry is boring enough to conquer. Nearby, two children giggle as they scoop water into small jars, then sneak behind their mother to pour it down her back. She shrieks, then laughs, and the whole line of washers joins in. That's joke number 2. Practical rinsing and impromptu water fights are not mutually exclusive. Laundry day is a playground if you're under 10. Sometimes. Rinse water is flavored with herbs. You catch a whiff of chamomile and mint drifting from one basin. These aren't for stain removal, they're for scent. A luxury that adds a whisper of perfume to everyday wear. Wealthier households could afford more exotic oils, but villagers made do with what grew near their homes. You run a damp cloth through your hands and detect the faintest sweetness, like a secret handshake with the garden. A group of young women start a work song, soft and repetitive, sung in a minor key. Their voices rise and fall, and the song is less about melody than rhythm, each line marking emotion, each pause signaling a ring. You let the pattern cradle your thoughts until they blur into something half like memory, half like dream. It feels like a lullaby intended for the garments as much as the people. You smile because honestly, your own socks deserve lullabies too. And then, a detail you didn't expect. One woman sets her garment in the water and uses her foot to gently press it down. Swaying side to side, the cloth ripples like seaweed, dirt streaming away with each motion. This foot rinse saves her hands for wringing and works as a lazy stretch. You consider the ergonomics and approve. Historians still argue whether such techniques were widespread or just improvisations, but you know efficiency when you see it. A boy, eager to impress, carries 2 jugs at once. He struts down the bank, only to misjudge his balance and tumble sideways into the shallows. He surfaces, sputtering, clutching a soggy tunic triumphantly as if falling in was the plan all along. Everyone cheers, because why not? That's joke number 3. The Nile doesn't just rinse cloth, it rinses pride too. By late morning, the rinse water runs clearer. Fabrics, once dull, now gleam faintly in the sunlight. Their fibers, softened by pounding and soaking, shimmer as they drip. Women sling them over shoulders or spread them across reed mats. The current carries away the cloudy water, a reminder of how the Nile erases yesterday's dust with practiced indifference. You crouch low, fingers trailing in the stream, and think about how simple, patient rituals make the ordinary sacred. Here, the rinse is not just about laundry, it's a pact with the river, renewed every day. The rinsed garments, heavy and dripping, are carried to the drying fields like honored guests escorted to a banquet. You trail behind a woman balancing a reed basket piled high with limp linen, the bundle swaying gently as she walks. The path climbs slightly from the canal, away from the splash of water and closer to the whisper of wind over sand. You blink against the sunlight reflecting off wet fabric bright, almost dazzling, as if the Nile has decided to loan the garments some of its shimmer. At the drying grounds, rows of reeds stand upright in orderly fences, their tips bent slightly by the breeze. The washers stretch cloth across them, smoothing wrinkles with practiced sweeps of the palm. Each garment hangs in the sun like a flag declaring loyalty to the kingdom of clean. The sight is oddly ceremonial, a silent parade of tunics and sheets fluttering in white waves. A mainstream fact whispers through the flapping hems Egyptians often prized whiteness in linen, associating it with purity and even divine favor, which is why bleaching and careful drying were so important. A tunic that dried crooked, spotted, or discolored risked not only social embarrassment, but also spiritual awkwardness. You lean in close to watch the technique. The fabric is tugged gently, pulled taut across reed poles, and pinned by simply tucking corners into splits in the wood. No clothespins yet, just gravity, friction, and clever hands. Children help by holding down one end while mothers stretch the other. The smaller kids, predictably, get distracted and start hiding behind the hanging sheets, turning the laundry ground into a maze. That's joke number 1, the world's first game of hide and seek, brought to you by Domestic Chores. The air here smells different than by the canal. Instead of suds and silt, you breathe dry sun, faint reeds, and the delicate ghost of herbs rubbed into the rinse. A breeze slides through, rustling the reeds like applause. You can almost hear the garments sigh in relief, as though happy to bask after their pounding. Linen behaves like a living thing, tightening when wet, loosening as it dries, remembering creases like a stubborn old man to coax it straight. Women stroke hems repeatedly, as if taming a restless animal. One woman hums as she smooths out a long sheet, and another joins her, the tune wandering lazily across the field. The rhythm is slower now, calmer than the pounding songs by the canal. Drying is less about force and more about patience, a chance for conversation to stretch like the fabric itself. You hear talk of temple festivals, rumors of grain prices, and even complaints about reed mats that keep splintering. The chatter drifts upward like incense, light but persistent. A quirky tidbit emerges from one corner. Some families sprinkle natron lightly onto damp fabric as it dries, hoping the residue will keep garments fresher longer and discourage insects. It's not foolproof, but it's tradition. You touch one tunic and feel the faint grit, a reminder that every cleanliness trick has its cost. Wearers might itch slightly, but at least their tunic smells less like last week's goat. Children chase each other between the sheets, occasionally knocking one loose so it flops dramatically into the sand. A groan rises from the mother, who must now rewash or at least re-rinse the garment. You see her roll her eyes, mutter something ancient and cranky, then laugh despite herself. That's joke number 2, even 3,000 years ago. Sand was the final boss of laundry. In wealthier households, drying might look different. Courtyards offered privacy, with ropes strung between mud brick walls or wooden pegs hammered into beams. Servants would flutter garments overhead like giant sails, catching breezes funneled through the narrow lanes. Historians still argue whether fabrics were sometimes bleached deliberately by leaving them in sun mixed with certain plant waters, or whether the desert sun alone was trusted. Either way, the whiteness of linen in tomb art isn't just artistic fancy, it was a cultural ideal carefully pursued with patience and sunlight. Back at the field, you notice how drying doubles as inspection. While stretching, women run their hands along seams, check for thinning patches, and tug loose threads for later mending. A garment too worn is set aside with a resigned sigh. Sometimes it becomes a child's tunic. Sometimes it's cut into strips for household use. Even bandages. Nothing goes to waste. You admire the quiet pragmatism. Life here is circular. Every fiber reused until it simply vanishes into dust. A breeze picks up, stronger this time. The linen ripples like sails on a fleet ready to depart. You imagine each garment whispering a story into the wind where it's been, whose sweat it bore, whose arms it wrapped. The image lulls you until the sudden squawk of a goose breaks your reverie. One bird has wandered into the drying rows, convinced that linen makes excellent shade. It waddles beneath a tunic and honks proudly, unwilling to leave. Children chase it, laughing, until the bird darts out in a flurry of wings. That's joke number 3, geese, it seems. Moonlight as quality inspectors. As the day stretches toward noon, the field brightens with rows of drying white. From a distance, the scene must look like an encampment of ghosts waving their arms. Up close, it's peaceful, slow work, punctuated by the flap of cloth and the occasional scolding of children. You sit back in the sand, eyes half shut, letting the rhythmic flutter soothe your mind. The garments sway, the reeds whisper, the sun warms your face. Laundry may be tedious, but here, in this field of fluttering linen, tedium feels like calm. You could drift into sleep just watching the clothes breathe in the wind. By the time the linen starts to flutter dry, the energy of the day shifts. The adults ease into slower motions, smoothing seams, checking hems, sipping water from clay cups. The children, however, sense opportunity. You see them transform the drying ground into a carnival, weaving between hanging tunics, splashing each other with leftover rinse water, and occasionally turning reed poles into balancing beams. Laundry day is supposed to be dull, but through their eyes it's a playground stitched together from cloth and sunlight. One girl crouches at the canal edge, scooping water into a broken jar and carefully dribbling it down the back of her brother's tunic. He squeals, whirls around, and retaliates by flicking droplets at her face. Soon, 3 more kids join, forming a squadron of miniature warriors armed with wet rags. The air fills with laughter, the garments above them swaying like banners of battle. That's joke number 1, somewhere between rinsing and drying. Laundry has declared itself a sport. A mainstream fact: children in ancient Egypt were often expected to contribute to household labor from a young age. Whether grinding grain, carrying water, or yes, helping with laundry, their tasks taught them family responsibility. But as you watch, you realize chores and play blend seamlessly. A boy runs a cloth along a reed pole, pretending it's a chariot horse's reins. Another uses a wrung-out rag as a whip, snapping it harmlessly in the air. They're learning technique: how to handle wet fabric, how to stretch and twist even as they laugh. One quirky tidbit floats through the chatter. Some families tie smaller children's tunics to reeds while drying, not just to straighten the fabric, but also to keep little ones from snatching them as costumes. You spot a toddler waddling proudly in a garment twice her size, the hem dragging a trail of sand. She stumbles, giggles, and is promptly rescued by her grandmother, who sighs but secretly smiles. You recognize the same proud look of any modern child wearing oversized clothes and declaring, "It's mine now." The older children invent a game called Catch the Shadow. As sheets billow, shadows ripple across the sand, and the kids leap to trap them under their feet. They shriek when the breeze changes and the shadow slips away, only to chase it again. You chuckle softly. Imagine trying to patent that as an entertainment device. Linen shadows? TM. Guaranteed to distract your kids for at least an hour. A group of mothers glance up from their work, half amused, half exasperated. They know the chaos is inevitable. Laundry day, they whisper, is not complete without at least one child falling into the rinse trough, one chasing a goose, and one wearing a reed basket as a helmet. Right on cue, a boy plops a basket on his head and marches through the sheets, declaring himself protector of tunics. The mothers shake their heads but let him be. Ancient childhood, it seems, is part theater, part training ground. Historians still argue whether structured play had a formal role in teaching children skills, or whether kids simply absorbed lessons by imitation. But here, Boba Fai, the overlap is obvious: every splash, every tug at a sleeve, every attempt to wring a rag like the adults builds muscle memory. When these children are grown, their motions will be automatic, as ingrained as the beating of cloth on stone. One child notices you watching and offers you a dripping rag with a mischievous grin. You hesitate, then play along, flicking water gently in his direction. He squeals with delight and races off. Triumphant! That's joke number 3. Congratulations! You've just been recruited into the world's oldest water fight. The adults. Meanwhile, Baba weave their own kind of play into work. Between stretches of cloth, they joke about whose husband stains tunics the fastest, Whose child is most inventive with excuses? Whose goose is the loudest? The teasing flows as easily as the river. You realize gossip isn't just amusement. It's the social glue that keeps long hours from feeling endless. In some ways, the children's games mirror the adults' chatter. Both turn monotony into rhythm, labor into something bearable. A boy crouches beside his grandmother, eager to help. She hands him a smaller cloth, guiding his tiny hands as he smooths it along a reed. He presses too hard, nearly tearing the edge. But patiently, she shows the gentle pressure needed, the slow sweep of palm against weave. Watching. You feel a pang of recognition. This is how skills pass not through lectures, but through 1,000 small demonstrations wrapped in love and laughter. You notice the sun climb higher, bleaching the sand, intensifying shadows under the linen. The air vibrates with heat. Yet the children keep running, unstoppable. They dash between drying garments that billow like tents, squealing as the wind momentarily engulfs them. To them, this field of sheets is a wonderland, a city of cloth with endless doorways. To you, it's a reminder even chores can hold magic if seen through restless eyes. The breeze softens again, and with it, the children tire. They flop in the shade of drying sheets, hair damp, clothes clinging to their skin. Mothers chuckle and let them rest. Laundry day may demand much, but it gives back quiet evenings, where weary children snore softly beside neatly folded tunics. You settle into the scene, watching linen sway, and hearing the soft sigh of kids drifting down from laughter to drowsiness. The garments dry, the chores progress. But for a moment, everything is suspended in sunlight and fabric. Work, play, teaching. Rest it all folds together, like layers of linen fluttering in the breeze. The sun is climbing, and while children drowse in the shade of fluttering linen, you notice another contrast taking shape. A donkey plods by, carrying a basket of clothing clearly too fine for the canal stones. The fabric gleams almost translucent, its weave tighter and smoother than anything you've seen laid out to dry. Following behind is a servant, eyes down, shoulders bent. He carries not just the clothing, but the quiet weight of someone. Here it is the divide between families who wash their own tunics and those who hand the task to others. You watch as the servant finds a patch near the water, carefully away from the villagers. He kneels and sets the garments down on a reed mat, unrolling them as if they were offerings. The linen has a faint sheen, a luxury fabric woven from exceptionally fine flax. A mainstream fact slips in easily: the wealthiest Egyptians, especially nobility and temple officials, prized sheer, almost transparent linen, often layered in multiple garments. Producing it required enormous labor, and keeping it spotless demanded even more. Hence, wealthy households delegated laundry to servants or hired professionals. Cleanliness was prestige, stains were scandal. Meanwhile, villagers nearby scrubbed their own garments, joking and stomping with bare feet. The contrast is almost theatrical on one side. A servant working in near silence, each motion cautious, careful not to tear the delicate cloth. On the other, families laughing, gossiping, and improvising stain removal tricks with whatever herbs they had. Both camps share the same water, but not the same freedom. A quirky tidbit drifts across the divide. Some noble households supposedly had specific laundry rooms in their estates, where servants worked with basins and oils behind walls. Far from prying eyes. Privacy wasn't about modesty, it was about controlling who saw the quality of your linen, and, by extension, the quality of your wealth. You hear a murmur among the villagers as they glance toward the servant. His presence doesn't offend, but it does remind them of the gap. One man jokes that noble tunics drink more perfume than water. Earning chuckles. That's joke number one, whispered just loud enough to be shared. not loud enough to reach. Humor has always been a shield against hierarchy. Historians still argue how rigidly laundry was divided by class. Some evidence suggests most households, even elite ones, did at least some washing themselves, especially of everyday garments. Others argue that the wealthiest avoided it altogether, employing washermen and washerwomen who were part of temple or estate staff. What you see now reflects both possibilities, villagers doing their own, servants handling another's. The truth, as usual, probably lived in the middle. The servant dips a tunic carefully, supporting its weight like a fragile bird. He doesn't stomp or pound. Instead, he massages the natron water gently through the fibers. This linen cannot survive rough handling. He lifts it, squeezes it lightly, and spreads it across his knee, smoothing wrinkles with deliberate care. The precision is you wonder if he ever laughs during laundry, or if nobility squeezes joy out of the cloth along with the stains. Meanwhile, back among the villagers, a woman teases her neighbor for overscrubbing. The neighbor protests, claiming her husband stains tunics faster than any goat can chew reeds. The laughter erupts again, warm and open. A boy adds, "Maybe trade him for a goat," which draws a round of claps. That's joke number 2, carrying the easy irreverence of people who can't be scandalized because their humor is already stronger than shame. The differences extend to drying. Villagers hang their clothes on reed fences, letting the sun bleach naturally. The servant, by contrast, lays noble garments flat on mats, pressing them with smooth stones to avoid stretching. Some pieces are even shaded lightly by woven screens. So the linen dries evenly without harsh discoloration. You blink, these tunics are pampered more than most people. And yet, for all the care, the servant's own clothing is plain, patched, a single layer of coarse weave that clings damply to his skin. You feel a tug in your chest at the quiet imbalance. A mainstream fact emerges here: laundry wasn't just about hygiene. It was deeply tied to social status. A crisp, white tunic signaled not just cleanliness, but order, respectability, even closeness to the divine. Priests, for example, were required to wear spotless linen for rituals, sometimes changing multiple times a day. For common folk, a single clean garment was enough. For elites, cleanliness became performance, and someone else's labor kept that performance possible. The children, now revived, creep toward the servant, curious. One little girl points at the noble tunic and whispers that it looks like water turned into cloth. Another asks if it's meant for a ghost. The servant hides a smile, then gently shoos them away. Mindful of... That's joke number 3. Courtesy of a child who sees silkiness and decides it belongs to the afterlife. You glance between the groups and realize how the river equalizes them all. No matter the class, no matter the fabric. The Nile washes everything the same way: water soaking, dirt loosening, sun drying. The social gap remains. But the mechanics blur. Sweat, stains, and dust don't care if you're noble or farmer. The only difference is how gently your tunic gets treated, and who shoulders the labor. The servant, finished with one garment, folds it neatly, sets it aside, and begins another. His motions are silent, efficient, practiced. The villagers, still chattering, ring and laugh, their tunics hanging crooked but drying all the same. You feel the tension between both worlds, but also the strange harmony laundry day binds everyone, even if it divides them. At the end of the day, everyone longs for the same thing: a clean garment against the skin, a fresh start, a sense of dignity stitched into the weave. By mid-afternoon, the air carries a dry shimmer, and the freshly beaten and rinsed linen lies stretched across reeds, drying into sheets of pale brightness. But not every garment emerges spotless. You notice a few stubborn blemishes, brown blotches from spilled beer, faint purple trails from wine, smudges of ink betraying careless scribes. This is where the real creativity of Egyptian laundry emerges: the art of stain removal. You crouch near a group of women armed with jars and bowls, their conversation quieter now, focused on coaxing stains into surrender. One woman kneels over a tunic marked with an ugly reddish splash. She mixes natron paste with a dab of goose fat, smears it onto the stain, and leaves it in the sun for a while. A mainstream fact makes itself known: fatty substances were often combined with alkaline powders to draw out oily residues. The paste looks messy, but after a rinse, the blotch fades. You nod approvingly: early chemistry, humble yet effective. Beside her, another woman faces the classic disaster wine stains. Grapes, stubborn little rebels, cling to fabric like secrets. Her method: she sprinkles crushed sycamore fig bark into water, rubs it onto the stain, and mutters that it's a trick older than my grandmother. Historians still argue whether fig bark genuinely lightened wine stains or whether it was simply an aromatic cover. Either way, she insists it works, and the confidence alone seems to make the blotch retreat. Meanwhile, a young scribe's apprentice has brought in a tunic blotched with ink. He hovers nervously as his mother lays it out, sighing like a doctor about to perform risky surgery. A quirky tidbit pops into view: Egyptians sometimes used powdered gypsum mixed with water to draw ink out of fabric. She sprinkles the chalky dust, lets it dry, and then scrapes gently with a pottery sherd. It's a slow process, leaving faint traces but saving the tunic from complete ruin. You imagine the apprentice explaining to his master why his sleeves look like they've been snowed on. That's joke number one. Yes, it's a fashion choice, not an accident. Stains bring stories. A brown streak on a child's garment sparks laughter as the mother recalls the boy tumbling headfirst into a date basket. A yellow smear on another tunic provokes jokes about a husband who cannot drink beer without baptizing himself. These blemishes are records of daily life, each mark a miniature chronicle of meals, accidents, or mischief. The washers know it, and while they scrub diligently, they also smile. Laundry isn't just about erasing, it's about retelling the stories before. Some remedies border on superstition. One woman insists that reciting a protective phrase while rubbing natron into a grease spot ensures success. Another believes spitting lightly before applying soapwort drives the stain away faster. Historians still argue whether these rituals had symbolic connections to purification ceremonies, or whether they were simply habits wrapped in belief. Watching them, you sense both the practical and the magical braided together like strands of linen. You lean closer as another washer demonstrates her prized method, mixing lemongrass with vinegar to target sweat stains. The mixture smells sharp but oddly pleasant, like a garden scolding you politely. She rubs it into the underarm of a tunic, leaves it for a few moments, then rinses. The result is lighter, fresher, almost scented. She beams proudly. That's joke number two. You suspect her secret weapon is as secret as Grandma's cookie recipe everyone knows, but they nod as if it's exclusive. Nearby, a young boy experiments on a rag, rubbing it with sand to see if friction alone will erase a mark. The fabric frays instantly, and his mother swoops in, clucking about ruined cloth. He shrugs, unbothered, and says he was inventing something new. You chuckle. That's joke number three, the earliest patent attempt for sandpaper laundry. Immediately denied. Some stains, though, simply refuse to yield. A dark blotch on a workman's kilt draws sighs of resignation. It will become a patchcloth. The women decide. Here lies another practical truth. Egyptians valued reuse. Stubbornly stained fabric often lived a second life as bandages, cleaning rags, or padding for sandals. Nothing wasted. Nothing truly lost, only transformed. The afternoon light grows. Women sit back, comparing successes, teasing one another for failed remedies. A chorus of advice rises, each voice offering the best method. Some swear by natron, others by clay, still others by mystery herbs. The debate is gentle, like waves lapping against stone. You realize the stains aren't just marks on fabric, they're catalysts for memory, humor, and shared expertise. As the garments finally dry, the stains, faded or gone, leave behind a sense of triumph. You breathe in the mingled scents of natron, herbs, and sun-warmed cloth. The field of linen, once blotched and weary, now glows with quiet dignity. Watching, you feel the strange calm of problems solved slowly, patiently, with equal parts science and superstition. Laundry here isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. And persistence has its own kind of beauty. The heat slackens a little as the afternoon drifts on by. Amid the dusty, sun-baked scent of linen comes something softer, sweeter perfume. You follow the aroma and find a group of women kneeling with small clay jars, rubbing fragrant oils into freshly dried garments. The laundry has survived pounding, rinsing, wringing, and the stubborn stains of daily life. But now it's time for a touch of elegance, a final flourish that turns a plain tunic into something faintly divine. You watch as a woman dips her fingers into a jar of oil infused with lotus petals. She spreads it lightly across the hem of a tunic, smoothing the fibers while leaving behind a delicate fragrance. A mainstream fact rises with the scent. Lotus flowers were deeply symbolic in ancient Egypt, often representing rebirth and purity. Using them in oils wasn't just cosmetic, it whispered spiritual overtones. Imagine wearing your values on your sleeve, literally scented into your tunic. Another woman prefers frankincense oil. She rubs it along the neckline of a garment, the resinous smell sharp yet soothing. A quirky tidbit: certain oils doubled as insect deterrents. Linen left fragrant with myrrh or juniper might smell luxurious to humans, but far less appealing to moths and flies. So what appears to be an indulgence also keeps your garments from doubling as bug buffets. Practicality often hides under perfume. Nearby, two women debate the best scents. One insists that lotus is gentler, better for temple days. The other swears by cedar oil, claiming it lingers longer and impresses neighbors. Historians still argue whether perfumed clothing was common among villagers or mostly reserved for elites. Archaeological finds reveal jars of aromatic oils in both wealthy tombs and more modest homes, suggesting that while the richest had access to exotic blends, villagers used local herbs in creative ways. In this field, at least, everyone adds a touch of scent, even if it's only crushed mint leaves rubbed into hems. Children, of course, see perfume differently. One boy dabs oil onto his wrists, then prances dramatically, declaring himself a noble of the temple. His siblings collapse in laughter, chasing him until he trips over a drying reed. That's joke number one, the first perfume commercial, performed by a 9-year-old in a wrinkled tunic. You lean closer to observe technique. Oils are never poured directly. That would waste precious drops. Instead, fingertips or soft cloths spread the liquid thinly, worked into seams and edges where scent lingers longest. Sometimes the oil is mixed with a pinch of natron to form a kind of scented paste, rubbed into fabric to mask the faint mustiness of river rinses. It's subtle, not overwhelming. Egyptian laundry wasn't about drowning garments in aroma, but about layering scent like a gentle shadow. The sun, still fierce, turns the oils warm. You catch the faint shimmer on fabric. Sunlight in the breeze. The scent rises like invisible banners. Lotus here, frankincense there, cedar over yonder. The field becomes not just a laundry ground, but an open-air perfumery, blending notes into a sleepy symphony. You inhale deeply, and for a moment you could forget the pounding stones and sweating labor of the morning. A woman leans over, holding up her tunic proudly. She jokes that if her husband doesn't notice the perfume tonight, she'll pour the whole jar over his head. The others laugh, nodding knowingly. That's joke number 2. And you can practically hear centuries of spouses sighing in unison across time. Not all scents come from oils. Some women scatter dried petals or crushed herbs into folded garments before storage. A primitive form of sachet, you watch as mint, chamomile, and even a sprinkle of cinnamon bark vanish between layers of linen. The clothes will carry faint traces of gardens and kitchens, everyday aromas turned into small luxuries. It's another reminder that comfort isn't. New people have always found ways to make ordinary life smell a little better. A mainstream fact slips in oils weren't just cosmetic. They were tied to ritual purity. Priests entering temples anointed themselves and often wore clothing scented with resins and herbs. Cleanliness and fragrance signaled readiness for the divine. Villagers, commoning this, gave their laundry a similar touch of sacredness. Even if their gods were closer to home family, neighbors, and the satisfaction of a day's work. One young girl experiments with perfume by dipping a reed into oil and drawing shapes onto cloth. The oil darkens the linen briefly, leaving doodles of birds and spirals that fade as it absorbs. She grins proudly at her creation, declaring it art. That's joke number 3, the earliest graffiti, vanishing before her mother can scold her. As the garments soak in sunlight and scent, the field grows calmer. The beating, rinsing, and chasing give way to slower movements, folding, smoothing, inhaling. You sit back, half dreaming, as fragrances mingle in the warm air. Lotus, cedar, mint, frankincense, threads of scent that drift together like music. The day's labor ends not with sweat and grime, but with this quiet transformation, where cloth once dulled and dirtied becomes clean, bright and faintly perfumed. Laundry, you realize, is never just about survival. It's about dignity, beauty, and the small luxuries that make even the simplest tunic feel fit for a king. By now, the field is bright with linen fluttering in fragrant breezes, but you notice certain garments are treated with an extra seriousness. White tunics destined for temples or priestly duties receive a kind of reverence absent from ordinary washing. A woman smooths a sheet with both hands, almost like a prayer. Whispering, you lean closer. And suddenly it's clear, laundry in Egypt is not just domestic, it is sacred. A mainstream fact floats into place. Egyptian priests were required to bathe and change into clean linen several times a day before entering temple service. Purity wasn't just spiritual, it was visual, tactile, woven into every fiber of their clothing. The priest in spotless linen stood as a living symbol of order. Or Ma'at. Imagine showing up to a sacred ritual with a tunic blotched by beer stains. It simply wouldn't do. Clean fabric was as much a requirement as incense and hymns. You watch a mother tell her child not to run between certain garments because they are for the gods. The child sulks but obeys, understanding on some level that laundry can carry holiness. A quirky tidbit in some temple inventories. Laundry workers appear as part of the staff. Their task considered ritual service because garments worn in ceremonies had to meet strict purity. Washing, in this context, becomes an offering, as if each scrubbed tunic is a hymn sung with hands instead of voices. One woman dips her fingers into a jar of natron, sprinkles it on a garment, then whispers a protective charm before rinsing it again. Historians still argue whether such actions were formalized ritual acts or simply domestic superstition. Did households genuinely believe gods inspected their laundry? Or was it symbolic shorthand for respect? Either way, the gesture feels weighty, a reminder that chores and devotion can live side by side. You crouch beside a group folding garments for temple workers. They handle them gingerly, as though linen has become fragile parchment, Each fold is straight, each crease aligned. Corners tucked so precisely, you wonder if priests secretly graded laundry like teachers grading homework. One boy watching mutters that his father... That's joke number one. Apparently, buoyancy counts as divine approval. The conversation turns solemn when an elder recalls how, years ago, a careless washer allowed a speck of dirt to remain on a priest's robe. The garment had to be redone, the shame lingering longer than the stain itself. Cleanliness here is serious business. You think of modern dry cleaning mishaps and realize disappointment in laundry is timeless. On the other side of the field, villagers tend to their own garments with less ceremony, but still with respect. One woman hums a hymn while wringing her tunic, as if the rhythm of song strengthens the fibers. Another pauses to sprinkle water onto the ground as an offering before beginning her wash. For them, too. Laundry is not only about hygiene, but about balance, keeping life aligned with cosmic order. Even a shirt can be a symbol. If washed with the right intent, children hover curiously. One girl asks why priests need so many tunics. Her grandmother explains that gods notice details, and a wrinkle is like a lie. The girl's eyes widen, clearly resolving never to wrinkle anything again. You smile. That's joke number two. Fear of divine judgment as the original wrinkle-free guarantee. Perfumed garments, too, carry spiritual overtones. Oils of lotus, frankincense, and cedar weren't only for impressing neighbors, they were also ritual offerings, pleasing to deities. When priests walked into temples swathed in these scents, they carried gardens and forests into sacred halls. Even ordinary villagers, copying the practice, might believe a perfumed tunic made their daily prayers more potent. The gods, Bakiya, after all, were said to delight in fragrance. Historians still argue whether temple laundries were specialized guilds or simply groups of household servants seconded for religious duty. What is clear is that laundry for ritual garments carried prestige. To wash a priest's robe was to contribute invisibly to ceremony, as essential as the one who lit incense or carried offerings. Hidden labor, yet profoundly significant. One boy, cheeky and restless, sneaks under a drying robe and declares himself the high priest of geese. He honks ceremonially, flaps his arms, and stumbles into a reed fence. Everyone bursts out laughing, except his mother, who scolds him with a firm tug on the ear. That's joke number three. Goose priesthood short-lived, chaotic, and apparently hereditary only among mischievous children. The garments wave in the sun, glowing almost too bright to look at. You feel a hush settle, as though the breeze itself pauses out of respect. Clean linen is more than fabric. It's a thread between human and divine, a quiet bridge woven daily by ordinary hands. Watching the villagers stroke hems and whisper charms, you realize holiness isn't always found in temples, it can live here, in the soapwort froth, the careful folds, and the gleam of sunlit cloth swaying like prayers in the air. You follow a narrow path away from the drying fields, curious about the quieter figures you've heard whispered about the marketplace washers. Not every family has the time, strength, or patience to tackle laundry themselves. And so some turn to professionals, in the shade of a mud brick wall. You spot them, a pair of wiry men crouched over wide clay basins, their hands raw from natron. Their movements brisk but efficient. They work not for their own households but for others, exchanging suds and sweat for grain, fish, or a few copper deben. A mainstream fact hums here: professional washermen and washerwomen are attested in Egyptian records, especially in larger towns and estates. They formed part of the service economy, like bakers, brewers, or barbers. Their names appear occasionally on ostraca, tied to debts or payments. Proof that laundry could be a livelihood? It wasn't glamorous, but it kept households turning, temples supplied, and nobles satisfied. You watch as one man dips a tunic belonging to a scribe. The cloth is finer than his own, but he treats it with brisk confidence. kneading natron paste into the stains. His partner stomps a pile of workmen's kilts, humming an off-key tune. Around them lie reed baskets stacked with garments, each marked with a pottery shard scratched with symbols fish, bird, star, goat. A quirky tidbit reveals itself. Families often marked their laundry with little doodles so washermen could return the right garments without confusion. You imagine losing your only tunic to a neighbor and realize that laundry mix-ups have haunted humanity forever? The washermen are businessmen as much as cleaners. They bargain loudly, their voices cutting through the sleepy afternoon. A woman offers a jar of beer in payment. One man insists on grain instead, citing the coming festival when prices will rise. Historians still argue whether these negotiations were casual or regulated. Did temple scribes record every exchange, or did barter simply flow through trust? Either way, the men guard their baskets like treasure, because inside lie not coins but cloth, each piece worth hours of flaxwork. Children gather to watch, hoping for small jaws. One boy carries water, another helps wring cloth. Payment comes in crusts of bread or the occasional coin. But the pride is real. You catch a glimpse of your own childhood remembering the thrill of being helpful with chores that were more game than labor. That's joke number 1. The boy beams, as though hauling one jug makes him assistant manager of the laundry empire. The washermen are skilled in improvisation. One sprinkles ground barley mash into a basin, claiming it lifts sweat better than natron alone. Another rubs juniper berries into a hem for fragrance, grumbling that rich people expect their sleeves to smell like gardens. You chuckle, same problem. Different millennium. That's joke number 2, whispered across time by every laundress ever who wondered why clean wasn't good enough. You notice how quickly they work, where families linger and gossip. Professionals move with relentless rhythm. Each tunic is inspected, treated, rinsed, wrung, set aside. They rarely pause, their hands almost automatic. And yet, in the middle of the bustle, one man pauses to share a story a noble once refused to pay because the sleeves of his robe had dried unevenly. In retaliation, the washer spread the next garment under a goose roost. The noble wore it anyway, oblivious. The storyteller grins, and the crowd laughs. That's joke number 3, part mischief, part survival tactic. Laundry as a service has its own hazards. Garments left too long in the sun might bleach unevenly. Oils used carelessly might stain instead of perfume. And always, the risk of loss: one gust of wind, one hungry goat, and someone's precious tunic disappears. You see the tension in their eyes, the careful stacking of baskets under woven nets, the vigilance like guards protecting treasure. For them, laundry isn't just routine, it's reputation. A mainstream fact returns payments often came in kind. Washermen received grain, vegetables, or beer rather than silver. Some records even suggest that temple laundries received offerings directly from farmers as part of their tax obligations, tying clean garments into the cycle of tribute. Laundry, invisible and unglamorous, still connected fields, temples, and households in a quiet economic web. As afternoon deepens, the washermen finish a batch and carry the damp garments to a shaded courtyard where customers will collect them. You trail behind, inhaling the scent of natron. The work is relentless, the pay modest, but the pride is tangible. For villagers too busy with fields or too frail for heavy pounding, these professionals are essential. They are the silent keepers of dignity, the guardians of clean sleeves, the invisible workforce that ensures even the poorest can stand in public with a tunic free of yesterday's dust. You pause, feeling the hum of the marketplace around you, haggling voices, clucking chickens, the slap of sandals, laundry. Tucked into this rhythm, seems both ordinary and essential. The kind of work no one praises, yet everyone relies on. watching the washermen scrub and barter. You realize they embody an eternal truth: cleanliness may not be next to godliness, but it is always next to somebody's livelihood. The sun tips lower, its glare softening into the bronze haze of late afternoon. A breeze rolls off the river, carrying both relief and mischief. You notice the drying rows sway harder, cloth snapping like sails. Laundry day, it turns out, isn't finished when the tunics are rinsed and perfumed. The seasons themselves weigh in, testing the patience of every washer. You stand at the edge of the field, watching women brace against the elements as carefully as they scrubbed against stains. A mainstream fact slips into the scene: the Egyptian year was divided by the rhythms of the Nile Akhet flood, Peret emergence, and Shamu harvest. Each season brought its own laundry challenges. During flood time, water was abundant but muddied, making rinsing tricky. During harvest, dust blew thick from fields, clinging to damp cloth like uninvited cousins. In summer, heat dried linen quickly but risked bleaching it unevenly. Laundry, like farming, danced to the tune of the Nile. Right now, the breeze feels playful. Sheets flap loose, corners straining from their reed moorings. A boy dashes to catch one before it tumbles into the sand. He returns triumphant, holding it aloft like a fisherman with his catch. That's joke number one in Egypt. You don't fish from the Nile, you fish from the laundry line. But sometimes the elements are less friendly. You recall stories told earlier in the day of sudden desert winds. Khamsin storms that whip dust into every fold of cloth. Women laugh darkly about entire loads ruined in minutes. Some families keep reed mats or wooden screens handy, ready to shield drying garments when the sky turns ochre. Historians still argue whether communal drying fields had permanent shelters or whether families improvised on stormy days. Either way, Wasayat, everyone agrees that sand was the undefeated champion of stain creation. You lean closer to a group inspecting garments for flood stains. Water lines from muddy canals leave brown streaks that refuse to fade. One woman sighs, muttering that the gods enjoy their little jokes. She sprinkles natron and shrugs. A quirky tidbit floats here: some households deliberately reserved older, already stained tunics as flood clothes, worn only during the messy season, sparing nicer garments from inevitable ruin. Practicality. After all, is its own kind of perfume. Heat also plays tricks. In midsummer, drying is so rapid that garments stiffen like boards if not smoothed constantly. You watch a woman stroke her tunic again and again, muttering that linen has the memory of a camel, stubborn and long. Everyone laughs knowingly. That's joke number two: the only thing more stubborn than sand is linen itself. Her fingers leave neat ridges, the cloth softening as she works. But you can tell she'll be smoothing again tomorrow. The cold season, rare but real, poses different problems. At dawn, dew clings heavily to garments, delaying drying until the sun rises higher. In those months, families sometimes string ropes inside their courtyards, turning laundry into a private indoor forest of hanging linen. You imagine the smell of damp cloth lingering in every corner, reminding households that even luxury courtyards bend to weather's will. Children, of course, treat seasonal problems as games. When sand gusts sprinkle specks onto drying tunics, they compete to brush them away fastest. One boy rubs too hard and tears a seam, earning groans from his mother and giggles from his friends. That's joke number three, winner of the sand race. Loser of the tunic. Balance is always tricky. Historians still argue about whether families timed laundry deliberately around seasons or simply adapted as needed. Some evidence suggests that temple laundries stored garments in sealed jars during flood months, rationing clean linen carefully. Others believe laundry continued year-round, no matter the chaos, because dirt refused to take vacations. Standing here, Bachiai, you suspect both are true: life was planned and improvised, ordered and chaotic, much like the Nile itself. As shadows lengthen, the field grows calmer, winds soften, dust settles, and garments flutter peacefully once more. You breathe in the mingled scents of reed, natron, and faint oils. Imagining the cycle repeating flood, sun, and dew. Laundry in ancient Egypt was never just water and stone. It was negotiation with seasons. Patience stitched into daily routine. Watching a sheet ripple in the breeze. You realize each flutter is more than drying. It's a quiet treaty between fabric and the forces of nature, renewed again tomorrow. As twilight edges closer, the laundry field grows quieter, but not completely still. A cluster of women sit together with baskets of small jars and bundles of herbs, their voices dropping to a murmur. You wander closer, curious, and realize you've stumbled into a side of laundry less about fabric and more about skin. It seems the Egyptians knew that scrubbing, natron, and sun left more than tunics weary bodies. Two needed soothing. Laundry, strangely enough, bleeds into medicine. A mainstream fact sets the stage. Egyptian medical papyri, like the famous Ebers Papyrus, list dozens of herbal remedies for skin irritations, many of which overlap with substances used in washing. Soapwort, chamomile, and natron all appear both as cleaning agents and as treatments for rashes or sores. The line between medicine and laundry wasn't sharp, it was porous, as though cleanliness and healing were twin siblings. One woman crushes fresh chamomile into a paste, mixes it with water, and applies it to her arms after wringing garments all day. The smell is sweet, grassy, calming. She explains it prevents redness from the abrasive natron. A quirky tidbit: chamomile was so beloved in Egypt that it was offered to the gods as well as rubbed onto the skin. Imagine your detergent doubling as a divine gift. It gives multi-purpose cleaner a whole new meaning. Nearby, another woman mixes aloe sap with natron water, rubbing it gently onto a child's legs. The boy has small patches of irritation, perhaps from reeds or insects. Aloe cools, natron disinfects, and together they make a primitive antiseptic rinse. Historians still argue whether aloe was cultivated widely in Egypt or imported from trade with Nubia, but its presence in remedies is undisputed. You watch the boy sigh with relief, his frown fading as the mixture dries. A teenager, trying to impress, smears mint leaves onto his arms, claiming it keeps away gnats. His friends laugh when the gnats land anyway. Unbothered. That's joke number one. Mint is bug repellent great in theory, delicious in practice for the bugs. Women trade tips the way modern neighbors might swap recipes. One suggests rubbing pounded fenugreek onto itchy patches. Another recommends crushed desert dates mixed with oil to soften cracked heels. You notice how remedies grow from the same plants used in food and fragrance. Nothing is wasted. Laundry herbs double as medicine. Kitchen scraps double as balm. One mother rubs juniper oil onto her child's tunic, explaining it not only scents the garment but helps ward off skin irritations. The overlap makes sense if clothes touch skin all day. Why not make them medicinal? A mainstream fact slips in: Egyptians often believed in preventative care, keeping the body balanced, cool, and purified to avoid illness. Laundry became part of that philosophy. Clean clothes weren't just socially respectable, they were thought to support physical well-being. An elder shares a story of mixing garlic juice with natron to cleanse sores. The younger women grimace at the smell but admit it works. Garlic, strong and pungent, was both food and medicine, its reputation extending from kitchen to laundry. Historians still argue whether its healing powers were exaggerated by folklore or genuinely observed. Standing here, watching the elders' calm authority, you suspect experience trumps debate. Meanwhile, children treat laundry medicine as play. One boy smears clay onto his arm, declaring it a shield against sand monsters. His friends join, painting themselves in streaks of mud until they look like tiny warriors. That's joke number 2, the first spa day doubling as a battlefield costume. Their mothers sigh, then laugh, letting them be until it's time to scrub them down again. The connection between cloth and body grows clearer as twilight deepens. A woman rubs scented oil into her garment, then onto her skin, blending laundry and self into a single ritual. Another soaks a rag in herbal water, draping it across her forehead to ease the heat. Laundry day becomes healing day medicine stitched into routine. And then comes a more solemn note. One woman explains that temple laundry sometimes mixed herbs into priests' garments deliberately, ensuring both cleanliness and subtle protection during rituals. Was it symbolic practical? Both historians still argue, but here, sitting among jars and herbs, you see no contradiction. Cleanliness, scent, and healing flow together, as seamless as threads in linen. A boy toddles over, clutching a reed basket filled with mint sprigs. He plops down proudly, declaring he's brought medicine for the clothes. The laughter that follows is warm and affectionate. That's joke number 3, apparently. Tunics can get fevers, too. The evening air cools, carrying the mingled scents of herbs, oils, dalpa, and drying linen. You close your eyes, letting it settle into your lungs like a balm. Laundry, you realize buwabe, is more than pounding and rinsing. It's healing woven into daily life. An act of care not only for garments, but for the bodies that wear them. As the women lean back, weary but smiling, the boundary between medicine and washing blurs until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Lanterns flicker to life as the sun slips behind the horizon, their small flames glowing like stars caught in clay shells. You follow the villagers back from the reed fences and drying fields toward their homes. The air is cooler now, touched with the scent of smoke from cooking fires and the faint sweetness of perfumed linen. Laundry day, exhausting in its repetition, has stretched from dawn to dusk. Yet even as darkness settles, the work isn't entirely done. Inside courtyards, families gather around small fires, folding garments carefully. Tunics are shaken once, twice, then folded into neat squares, corners aligned with practiced precision. Sheets are rolled into bundles, bound with palm fiber ties. Mothers instruct children to stack folded linen onto reed shelves, away from the dirt floor. A mainstream fact linen was often stored in wooden chests or reed baskets, sometimes scented with herbs or natron to keep insects at bay. Garments weren't just left lying around, they were guarded as precious household assets. Nearby, an elder woman threads a bone needle, mending a hem torn during stomping. Her eyes squint in the lantern light, but her fingers are steady. A boy holds the fabric taut for her, proud to assist. You notice how the family circles her, watching quietly, as if stitching is a ritual as sacred as washing. A quirky tidbit: Egyptians sometimes used colored thread, red or blue, not for fashion but for symbolic protection, believing the hues repelled evil influences. Even a repair could double as a charm. The elder hums while she sews, each note in rhythm with her stitch, and you find yourself lulled by the sound. The men, some joke about whose tunic looks brightest, others grumble about stains the women couldn't entirely remove. Laughter ripples, soft and tired, as supper bowls are passed around. Children, too exhausted to play further, curl against reed mats, their small bodies draped in fresh tunics still warm from the day's sun. That's joke number 1. One boy insists his new clean shirt makes him run faster, then promptly trips on the threshold. The room erupts in quiet chuckles. As the evening deepens, a sense of satisfaction lingers. Garments folded, stains defeated, seams mended. The household feels renewed. Clean linen means more than neatness, it means dignity restored. The possibility of tomorrow carried gently in woven fibers. Historians still argue whether laundry had ceremonial end-of-day rituals or whether families simply wound down naturally. But what you witness feels ritualistic enough folding, mending, eating, resting. Outside, you hear neighbors chatting across walls, comparing whose clothes dried fastest, whose children caused the most chaos, whose goose stole which reed. That's joke number 2, apparently. The village goose has graduated from laundry inspector to professional thief. The banter fades into soft calls of goodnight, blending with the crackle of fires and the hum of crickets. The village exhales together, a long collective sigh of relief. One man, seated on a low stool, oils his sandals while his wife folds tunics beside him. He remarks that clean linen feels like sleeping in clouds. His wife teases that clouds don't smell of natron. Everyone laughs gently. That's joke number 3, the first Yelp review of Laundry Day Soft, but smells salty. As you sit in the courtyard, lantern light flickering on the folded stacks, you feel the fatigue in your bones mirrored by theirs. Yet the tiredness is sweet, softened by routine, threaded with pride. Laundry may be endless, but it also creates closure, giving each day a clean start for the next. You close your eyes, listening to the faint flap of a drying sheet in the night breeze, and feel yourself drifting with the rhythm of ordinary peace. And now the pace slows even further, settling into the softest cadence of all. Imagine the linen stacked neatly, the lantern flames dimming, the reed mats warmed by quiet bodies, the air fragrant with chamomile, cedar, and faint natron, cools as the desert sky reveals its canopy of stars. The Nile murmurs beyond the fields, a gentle lull that has whispered to generations, carrying away dust, stains, and the weight of long hours. Your thoughts float as lightly as the garments on the breeze. Every wrinkle smoothed, every stain coaxed away, every thread mended, small acts that together create a feeling of wholeness. You breathe slowly, deeply, the way villagers must after a day like this, satisfied that tomorrow will begin with clean sleeves and quiet dignity. The lanterns fade one by one until only the stars remain. Imagine yourself lying on a mat, linen cool against your skin, the warmth of family nearby, the hush of night wrapping you gently. The world narrows to stillness, a fire's last crackle, a child's sigh, the river's eternal song. And with that, you let go. The rhythm of pounding, rinsing, folding, smoothing dissolves into silence. Your breath slows, your body softens, and you drift the way the Nile drifts steady, timeless, carrying you gently toward dreams. Sleep now, with linen light and night deep, as ancient Egypt itself hums a lullaby just for you.